Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. So good to have you with us here on this Wednesday, still technically morning here on the East Coast. We're broadcasting as we always do from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. It is, as it always seems to be, an exceedingly busy time here covering space, space flight, and all the various apparatus that's supporting the spaceflight adventure. Over at Space Launch Complex 40, of course, at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, you're looking live at the main focus of our broadcast today, a Falcon 9 rocket that is set to send 29 Starlink V2 Mini optimized satellites into low Earth orbit. I'll talk more about that, of course, throughout the broadcast. Popping over to Launch Complex 36 as well. We're keeping tabs on what's going on with Blue Origin, as last night they rolled their second New Glenn rocket out to the pad there. You can see it's still in the horizontal position. Coming up next for the company, we'll be raising it vertically and conducting a static fire of the 7 BE4 engines that power Glenn Stage 1, or GS1 as they abbreviate it. They have already done a static fire for Glenn Stage 2 that happened earlier this year. And in fact, they've already done a static fire for the Glenn Stage 2 that will power the third flight of a New Glenn rocket that will be in support of the company's first Blue Moon Mark 1 cargo lander that will fly to the moon, bringing a couple of NASA payloads from the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program, or CLPS. Launch date hasn't been set for that mission just yet, but Blue Origin counting on the booster Never Tell Me the Odds that's flying the NG-2 mission. They're going to try to land that on their barge called Jacqueline. And if all goes well with that booster recovery, it's the booster that Blue Origin wants to use to fly its first moonbound mission. Well, of course, I have much more to say in the coming days about the NG-2 mission, which is set to send a couple of NASA spacecraft on their way to Mars for its Escapade mission. Simultaneously with all of these events that I just detailed for you is what's happening in low Earth orbit as we speak. The very first launch of JAXA's HTVX spacecraft on their H3 rocket went well, and right now the vehicle is making its approach to the International Space Station for the very first time. Earlier this morning, teams performed what was called a retreat demonstration, essentially for visiting vehicles to the space station if there's an issue either with the spacecraft itself or the station is not ready to receive at the time that they were expected, and for whatever reason, the vehicle needs to back away and stop its retreat. Is an important function that all spacecraft that are headed to the orbiting outpost need to be able to achieve. And so they did perform that. They brought it to the retreat point. They performed the go, no go pull for that demonstration, pulled it back to a designated position, and are now in the process of approaching the International Space Station. About 10 meters out, the Canadarm2 will perform the capture maneuver. The robotic arm is going to be guided on orbit by JAXA astronaut Kimia Yui alongside NASA astronaut Zena Cardman, who are watching from inside the cupola. This, of course, is the first time that an HTVX vehicle is making its way to the space station for capture and berthing. But the last time that Kimia Yui was on orbit, he had the distinction of being the first Japanese astronaut to capture an HTV spacecraft. In the intervening years, he's also been working on the development of the vehicle that you're seeing live there in proximity to the space station, not knowing that he would have the opportunity to be the one to help actually capture it while on board the space station as part of the Crew 11 mission. You're looking inside Mission Control now for the Johnson Space Center as teams are busy working this tight coordination for the contact and capture, the capture and berthing of the HTVX. We'll, of course, continue to monitor the approach of the HTVX, and when it gets a little bit closer to the point of capture, we'll be sure to bring these live pictures back into the broadcast. Just under 53 minutes to go, though, before the launch of this upcoming Falcon 9 rocket from Pad 40 here at the Cape. So we've got nearly 700 of you watching along with us live this morning. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into our live launch coverage today. Also want to thank our moderators as we're going along. Thanks to Jeff Hansen and Rick Donner for holding it down in the live chat. If you do see any of the other mods cruise on in throughout the course of the broadcast, be sure to give them a big old Spaceflight now hello. You can help the mods make their job that much easier just by following the rules of the chat. We ask that you hold off from delving into overt politics or religion and typing in all caps. We also ask that you post your message in English so that our moderators can respond as needed. Emojis are perfectly fine. We just ask that you don't create a huge block of them so it takes up a large percentage of the live chat here. And most importantly, we ask that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated with. We're also joined in the chat by one of our channel members, Cumulus Granatus, who can help answer folks' questions throughout the course of the broadcast today. SpaceX currently targeting a T0 liftoff of its Falcon 9 rocket at 12:16 p.m. Eastern, 16:16 UTC. As a reminder for our audience here today, if you're watching this live or if you're catching this as a replay later on, if you're here in the States, don't forget to set your clocks back. Once the clocks hit 2 a.m. on Saturday morning, they'll revert from Eastern Daylight Time to Eastern Standard Time. So 2 o'clock Eastern will become 1 o'clock Eastern. Of course, the UTC will stay the same. It'll still be 0600 at that point in the morning. I want to thank our wonderful channel member community for their continuous support of what we do here at Spaceflight Now, keeping us afloat. Thanks to folks like Karen O, Richard W, Kyle Goulet, Lone Solopsist, Mark Pachotnik, and many, many others. Sulfur for lunch. Good to see you. Marcia Shaddix. Hello, hello. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube. Access to our members-only Discord server. And, of course, the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Of course, we've got the crew out here this morning. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of our broadcast today. also got our photography team, of course, who's out and about getting ready to capture the Falcon 9 as it makes its ascent from Pad 40. You can follow them at their handles here on X. Adam is at Aburn NYC, Michael at MD Kane Jr., and John is at John Pisani Photo. While you're there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. You can also find us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook if you yourself are not on X. We'll be joined a little bit later in the program by our friends P. Carsons with Max Q Productions. You saw Chuck and Jen Briggs' camera view earlier on the show, giving us a glimpse of the New Glenn rocket. Just about 48 and a half minutes to go as SpaceX is counting down towards the liftoff of its Falcon 9 today. In roughly 10 minutes is the point at which SpaceX will make the call on the start of prop load for today's fueling operations. SpaceX does their poll electronically, so if they're in a good position, they can make that assessment earlier. Mark, generally speaking, that is when things really get rocking and rolling for the Falcon fueling process. So let's go ahead and familiarize everyone the countdown timeline and what's still out ahead of us. Once the determination that they are go for the start of prop load has been issued, fueling of the Falcon 9 will begin at the T-minus 35-minute mark with the loading of RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen will begin to flow on board the rocket's booster. Half an hour before a liftoff is when SpaceX starts to load a cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. Same will be true on the second stage a few minutes after that. The helium will be used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. T-minus 23 minutes is when second stage RP-1 loading is expected to wrap up. And at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is the beginning of the strong back chill down process. SpaceX at this point in the count is thermally conditioning the feed lines at the pad prior to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. We'll see this visually manifest as the big vent at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. That vent lasts about 4 minutes in duration, setting the stage for the LOX to start flowing at T-minus 16 minutes. 7 minutes out is when SpaceX will use some liquid oxygen to perform a chill down of the 9 Merlin engines that power the Falcon 9 first stage booster. They'll flow a little bit of the LOX through the plumbing and turbo pumps to protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage at startup. 6 minutes before takeoff, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the retraction of the strong back. First, the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, it will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff. Then at that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before departure, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full. Same will be true on the second stage about a minute afterwards. At that point, the Falcon 9 rocket will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in its automated startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director will then give their call that they are, in fact, go for launch. 45 seconds before liftoff, the engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, and they're in a good posture from a weather perspective, the command will be given for the hold-down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a teaser liftoff. Once again, currently targeting 12:16 p.m. Eastern, 16:16 UTC for our friends around the world, or just about 44.5 minutes from now. Time now currently T minus 42 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. The 45th Weather Squadron, in their outlook for this mission, was looking at a 95% chance for favorable weather at the pad. Good news on that front. The booster recovery weather, though, listed as a moderate risk on a scale of low to moderate to high, and highlighted in their outlook. And you can see or infer why looking at the weather loop from the GOES East satellite. You can see some activity certainly off the coast of Georgia and up further north off the coast of South Carolina. Meteorologist with the 45th said, and I'll quote, "The only concern is the negligible risk of a cumulus cloud rule violation. Recovery conditions remain a watch item due to elevated waves off the Carolina coast." End quote. And in fact, we do have a new T0 of 12:35. We are adjusting our countdown clocks, but we're about an hour out from liftoff now at this point. SpaceX making those adjustments quite possibly to account for the rough waves in the recovery zone for this mission. Our clock has been adjusted. As you can see, we're currently T minus 59 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. You're taking a live look back now at the HTVX vehicle. As you can see, the Canada Arm 2 is starting to make its approach. We're on track for the capture and eventual berthing of this vehicle. Not pictured on screen, of course, but the two astronauts in charge of this contact maneuver are JAXA astronaut Kimia Yui and NASA astronaut Zena Cardman, who are monitoring this process from inside the cupola and working with teams at the Johnson Space Center coordinate the capture of the very first HTVX vehicle that has been launched and will hopefully have a nominal berthing to the International Space Stations. as the Canadarm2 is preparing to make contact with the HTVX, and we're continuing to track the progress of what will hopefully be the start of fueling for the Falcon 9 rocket. Let's go ahead and listen to NASA's Rob Navius, who is providing commentary for NASA amid the ongoing government shutdown, but of course, with these critical operations still needing to continue on. NASA providing coverage of this, so let's listen in.
Launch atop JAXA's H3 rocket from the Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan, about to conclude. Now just 12 meters separating HTVX from the grapple fixture on the International Space Station's Canadarm2.
Station Houston on 2 for HTVX. Confirm capture point hold for step 8 in 1.102.
Houston Station, for step 8 of 1.102, we can confirm CP hold.
Houston copies.
This is Mission Control Houston. Aki Hoshide confirming with Zena Cardman that HTVX has reached one final hold point at the 10-meter mark. Now polling the flight controllers for a go, no-go to resume the operations that will involve Kimiya Yui extending the Canadarm2 from this 10-meter mark to the grapple fixture on HTVX to complete this rendezvous. HTVX is about to be placed into what is called free drift, inhibiting any further thruster firings so as not to perturbate the operation of the Canadarm2 robotic arm as it moves in to grapple the vehicle.
Time now, T minus 49 minutes, 30 seconds For those of you who may just be joining in with our live coverage of the Starlink 10-37 mission and curious as to what you're seeing on your screen, first off, thanks for stopping by. Secondly, we're watching the live coverage of the contact and capture of Japan's first HTVX cargo spacecraft that has made its way to the International Space Station and will soon be grappled by the Canadarm2, which you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. JAXA astronaut Kimiya Yui and NASA astronaut Zena Carvman are overseeing operations of this procedure from the International Space Station in the cupola, coordinating with teams in mission control at the Johnson Space Center. The clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is corresponding not to the capture of the HTVX, but rather to the timing of the Falcon 9 rocket's liftoff from Pad 40, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, just about 42 minutes away from the planned liftoff of that rocket. Teams have pushed back the planned launch time of the mission to 12:35 p.m. Eastern, 16:35 UTC. SpaceX didn't give a reason for the adjustment, but heading into this launch opportunity, meteorologists with the 45th Weather Squadron did note that there were potentially some rough waves out in the booster recovery zone, which may be the reason for the adjustment here today. If SpaceX is unable to launch its Falcon 9 rocket from Slick 40, teams do have, I believe, another opportunity in a 24-hour turnaround, roughly there speaking. In a 24-hour delay, there would still be a 95% chance for favorable liftoff conditions, with the liftoff winds being the watch items. Booster recovery weather would also improve in a 24-hour turnaround. Meanwhile, teams are discussing whether they want to proceed with the contact and capture of the HTVX right now, or wait till the next handover for communications from crew down to mission control. Let's go ahead and listen back into this coverage in progress.
Northwest to southeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator, about to emerge off the east coast of South America over the South Atlantic.
And Station Houston on 2 for HTVX Xena. So that big gap in Optimus, we think that's conservative. It's going to be more like a 4-minute continuation and then a 20-second handover after that.
Okay, copy. That is great information. We can, with your go, start working step 4 of 1.110.
Okay, copy that. Stand by. We're doing the final pull on the ground.
We copy all.
Station Houston on 2 for HTVX. You are go for HTVX capture sequence. Perform step 4 in robotics procedure 1.110. Begin monitoring the backaway cue card.
Station copies. We are go for the capture sequence. We will start with step 4 of
And we're in that brief handover in S-band communications. But the approval has been given for Kimiya-Yui to begin the work with the Canadarm2 robotic arm to extend it slowly and methodically toward the grapple fixture on the vehicle.
We're going to pop away from the progress on the HTVX capture sequence until we get visuals back of the cargo vehicle. Currently T-minus 41 minutes, 34 seconds and counting to the planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket at pad 40. Also keeping eyes on Launch Complex 36, where overnight Blue Origin rolled out the New Glenn rocket for the second flight of that program. Specific launch date has not yet been announced by the company, but it will carry a pair of satellites for NASA's Escapade mission, which is bound for Mars once it does lift off. Of course, in between now and then, there will be a static fire test of the 7 BE-4 engines at the base of the booster. Also, things continue to be exceedingly busy elsewhere around the Cape. If we pop over to Launch Complex 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center, you can see work is continuing quite feverishly over at the Starship pad. This, of course, is adjacent to the pad that has been in operation at LC-39A in support of SpaceX's Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy rockets. Teams are working towards outfitting this pad to support its Starship vehicle, which will, of course, launch from not only this pad here in Florida, but also a pair of Starship launch towers are set to be erected over at Space Launch Complex 37, the former home of ULA's Delta IV rockets, most recently the Delta IV Heavy. Let's turn back now to the HTVX since the Canadarm is in motion at 4.5 meters. Let's listen back into commentary from Rob Navius.
Both vehicles are in free drift. Two and a half meters. One meter away, standing by for capture. We have initial capture. This is soft capture. Waiting for snares to close and carriage retract.
As you've been hearing from NASA's Rob Navius, a soft capture of the HTVX has been achieved. They're working on the hard capture process now. Meanwhile, we're T-minus 36 minutes, 39 seconds and counting for the Falcon 9 rocket launch. Just about a minute and a half away from the start of fueling, assuming that SpaceX is moving forward with this current T0. Let's listen back into Rob Navius for a minute.
And we have capture confirmed. Capture confirmed at 10:58 a.m. Central Time, 11:58 a.m. Eastern Time. We have a good handshake between the Canadarm2 and HTVX. Its arrival at the International Space Station now complete. Capture again confirmed at 10:58 a.m. Central Time, 11:58 a.m. Eastern Time, as HTVX and the International Space Station flew 260 miles over the South Atlantic.
Houston Station on Space Ground 2, HTV capture complete. Go for HTVX post capture reconfiguration action. And I just want to say congratulations to all teams and people involved in this mission. Also, thank you very much for your hard work and support for the first HTVX mission. This is a historic event in the Japanese space program. Spacecraft is so beautiful and shining, as if it is representing our future, bright future. Thank you again for delivering these important supplies and experiments. I can't wait to open this golden treasure box. 日本の皆さん、HTVX 君が無事に ISS に着きました。このミッションを通じて、日本が高い技術力で国際的な
Well, JAXA astronaut Kimi Yui continues his comments in Japanese. We're continuing to monitor the progress of the Falcon 9 rocket. I'm going to hold on these pictures for just a moment to listen for a response.
Congratulations to you guys, and congratulations to the entire team, to all of those around the world who has contributed towards this successful mission. And special congrats to our friends in Japan who has worked so hard for years in development and training to make this dream come true. HTV-X is the 11th vehicle to visit the ISS. Like its predecessor, HTV, and its legacy, HTV-X will be a key element towards our future in space together, in low Earth orbit and for lunar exploration. Once again, congratulations.
And with the successful capture of the HTV-X, we're going to bring our attention back over to the Falcon 9 rocket, as fueling should be underway now. SpaceX is in fact still targeting the T0 as planned. Again, the booster recovery weather remains a watch item per meteorologist with the 45th Weather Squadron. So if things come down right to it and SpaceX is unable to launch today, we'll of course wait for official word on the reasoning behind that if that does come to bear, but that may be a likely reason for why things are scuttled if in fact the launch is scrubbed, which hasn't happened yet, but just setting the table for what may happen. Currently T-minus 32 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. It's going to be a little bit hard to see the start of fueling today, just given the heat distortion between our camera and the rocket there at the pad. Actually, we are starting to see a frost line form, a little bit of vapor there on the right-hand side of the rocket as SpaceX loads the super cold densified liquid oxygen aboard the rocket's booster. It's a good visual indication that, in fact, SpaceX is tanking its Falcon 9 rocket and will at least make a concerted effort to try and launch at the current T0 of 12:35 p.m. Pacific, 16:35 UTC. For those who may just be joining us, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the Starlink 10-37 mission set to lift off from Space Launch Complex 40 in just under half an hour from now. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now, and you're watching the Falcon 9 rocket there at the pad. The frost line starting to climb up the booster as the LOX is flowing. In less than 10 minutes, we'll see the start of the big vent as SpaceX thermally conditions the feed lines there at the pad prior to LOX load on the rocket's upper stage. Certainly appreciate the more than 1,500 of you who are watching along with us live. For those of you who got to see it with us, this will be a slight recap, but as we've been monitoring the process of the Falcon 9 fueling getting underway on board the International Space Station, the very first HTV-X spacecraft from JAXA was captured and is set to be berthed to the Harmony module of the orbiting outpost. Things are a little bit overcast today, as you can certainly tell from this camera angle. A bit bluer skies from where Chuck and Jen Briggs are standing down on Merritt Island. So depending on your vantage point, this launch could look notably different. We'll, of course, have our launch replays for you after liftoff. So assuming that the booster recovery weather doesn't scuttle things today, we'll have a good round robin of all of the camera angles that we're capturing this launch from. So even if it doesn't look the prettiest from the perspective that we're showing to you live in the moment, we'll go ahead and give you a full gander of what things look like throughout the course of capturing liftoff in a compilation after the fact. Time now T minus 26 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. As we're continuing to track the progress of the Falcon 9 rocket coming up to the big event in a few minutes from now. I want to give you some better angles on activities that have been happening around the Cape in the last 24, 48 hours or so, a little bit further back as well. As we mentioned and showed you live pictures earlier in the broadcast, Blue Origin has rolled its New Glenn rocket out to the pad ahead of a static fire test. These are some images that were shared by the company as well as its founder, Jeff Bezos. You can see some of the pad crew there to give you a sense of scale for this operation. The size of the rocket powered by 7 BE-4 engines, which will be involved in a static fire in the not too distant future. A launch date hasn't been set yet for this mission, as of course teams are working through the static fire operations that are yet to come, and of course want to get that data back before putting something firmly on the books for the public. Elsewhere at the Cape, over at Space Launch Complex 41, just down the road from SpaceX, is United Launch Alliance's pad, and teams confirm that they have now integrated the spacecraft that is going to be flying on the next Atlas V mission. You're looking at a photo shared by ULA today of the Viasat 3 F2 or Flight 2 spacecraft, encapsulated in those payload fairings that were hoisted up and stacked atop of the Atlas rocket inside the vertical integration facility. ULA is currently targeting a launch on November 5th, if all continues to move well, and of course the weather supports a launch that day. Naturally, we'll have live coverage of this mission when they're ready to fly it as well. Also, elsewhere around the Cape, not a launch that is immediately on the horizon, but setting the table, if you will, for launch operations to come is Stoke Space, which has been getting things ready over at Launch Complex 14, reviving that pad in support of their Nova rockets. You can see here a test of the water deluge system that teams will use. And in a second, there will be a secondary clip showing the LOX liquid oxygen system. You can see there. Stoke Space described that as the LOX skid flowing nitrogen at fast fill set point pressure. Stoke Space is aiming for their first launch of a Nova rocket sometime in 2026, I believe, is their current timetable. Of course, we'll continue to monitor progress out here for Stoke and the other new launch providers that will be coming online in the years to come. That includes Viaspace, company based here in Brevard County, which is set to launch its rockets from over at Launch Complex 13, sharing that pad with Phantom Space. Time now, T-minus 22 minutes, 20 seconds and counting to the planned flight of this Falcon 9 rocket. We're just a couple minutes away from the start of the big vent. The feed line chill down process is just beginning. We should see the big vent start in about 10 seconds. And with the big vent now underway, this will last about 4 minutes in duration, setting the stage for second stage LOX load to begin at roughly T-minus 16 minutes. Coming up on 17 minutes ahead of the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. Just about 30 seconds remaining before this big event wraps up. Taking a look at our live chat, though. See, we've got a little more than 2,300 of you watching along with us live today. Appreciate you being with us this morning or early afternoon. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream to allow us more folks to join in with us in our live launch coverage. Also want to welcome in new channel members, Superiority, joining us with membership at the pad leader level, and Kyle Goulet. Apologies, Kyle, if I botched your last name there, but thanks to you and Curtis Blanchard for joining us at the mission specialist level. Also, my honey, pre-existing channel member, marking 10 months with us at the pad leader level, as second stage Loxode is now just getting underway. Also want to thank channel member and moderator Jeff Hansen for a $10 super chat saying, go Cape, go SpaceX, go Falcon 9, go Starlink, Godspeed 1083. 1083 is the tail number of the first stage booster that is launching today's Starlink flight. This will be its 15th trip to space and back. With just about 15 minutes remaining on the clock, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about where this Falcon 9 rocket's going to be flying once it leaves the pad today. It's talking a little trajectory here. Taking a look at a Google Earth view of Space Launch Complex 40. Falcon 9 rocket will fly on a northeasterly trajectory once it does leave the pad at the Cape. First stage booster following stage separation will target a touchdown on SpaceX's drone ship called Just Read the Instructions. If all goes well with this booster recovery, this would be the 139th good landing on this particular drone ship in SpaceX's 526th booster landing to date. Of course, SpaceX is interested in reuse for not only the boosters, but also for the payload fairings. Once the fairings jettison, they'll splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. They will then be brought on board one of SpaceX's recovery vessels, brought through Port Canaveral off to the Hangar X site here at the Kennedy Space Center, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future missions. Always good to see some wildlife here. Of course, all this rocket activity is nestled amid the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, so you never know what type of critters you can see flying or scurrying around here, depending on the time of day that you're visiting the Kennedy Space Center. But always keep your eyes peeled, especially if you're taking one of the tours on the buses around KSC. Speaking of taking tours around things, I know a bit of a stretch for a transition, but let's go ahead and talk about the Falcon 9 rocket, the workhorse vehicle. Take a tour around this 70-meter tall rocket. This is set to be SpaceX's 555th Falcon 9 launch to date, and the 490th Falcon 9 launch, or of a total reflight, I should say. This will be the 490th launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This is the 138th Falcon 9 of the year. Majority of the booster, or majority of the rocket is made up by the booster. This is B-1083, as we just mentioned, making its 15th trip to space and back. It's powered by 9 Merlin engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. Above the first stage is the inner stage, a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the vehicle's second stage, and at first stage at main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure clean separation. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until the point of stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage, the Falcon 9, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVac engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle, which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,000 to 500 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight to place the 29 Starlink V2 Mini optimized satellites into their intended orbit. Like with the booster, the upper stage also burns liquid oxygen and RP1. Following the deployment of the Starlink satellites, there will be one final burn, a deorbit burn, helping to drive the upper stage back into the atmosphere where it's designed to burn up and help eliminate the risk of creating unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack are the payload fairings, which currently encapsulate the 29 Starlink satellites. Fairings are made up of a carbon composite material and stand at 13.1 meters or 43 feet in height, and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. 2 fairing halves will be recovered a little bit further downrange from where the booster lands on the drone ship. We're currently T minus 7 minutes, 10 seconds and counting away from the flight of the Falcon 9 rocket. Coming up here momentarily, SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. Time now T minus 5 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. At this point, the first stage RP1 tank should be full. Should be getting pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket coming up in less than 30 seconds.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
As you just heard, we're now getting mission audio as well as pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket.
Strong back lower has started.
Shortly, we should see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Then we'll stay in that position until liftoff. You can see the arms have now opened up, and that large truss structure just starting ever so slowly to recline away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Want to thank K2 Hat for a $5 super chat, saying grateful for the coverage. All clouds here in Mico, Florida. Also, thanks to Virginia Pruitt for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that, Virginia. Coming up on 3 minutes before flight, we'll be hearing a call in less than 20 seconds that the first stage LOX tanks should be full.
Stage 1, LOX load complete.
With that call out, we're waiting for a similar call regarding the vehicle's second stage. Should be coming around the T minus 2 minute mark. T-minus 2 minutes and counting.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
And with that confirmation, the Falcon 9 rocket now fully loaded with its 1 million pounds of propellant. Coming into the home stretch here at T-minus 1 minute out is when we should be hearing the call that the Falcon 9 has entered into its automated startup sequence.
Gas launch closeout has started.
That call out regarding the venting you're seeing there at the pad as SpaceX vents the LOX from the feed lines. T-minus 1 minute and counting.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
We're now just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to confirm that they are in fact go for launch.
Go for launch.
And with that confirmation, we're coming up on the final 30 seconds ahead of liftoff. 30 seconds and counting. Fifteen seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Entered ignition and liftoff. Liftoff with a Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 10-37 mission. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Power and telemetry on. Falcon is supersonic. Max Q.
Falcon 9 now passing through max Qs. You just heard the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the rocket. Now about a minute and a half into flight, we're coming up to the MVAC chill, the thermal conditioning of the Merlin vacuum engine.
MVAC chill has started.
Good call out there from SpaceX. A few events are on tap next in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff or MECO at about T+2 minutes and 26 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. The payload fairings are set to jettison around the 3-minute mark. You can see if we go back to the SpaceX onboard camera view, the shadow of the plume on the waters of the Atlantic Ocean just offshore from Florida. You can see it just to the right of the plume. And there we have MECO. Stage separation. Callouts coming up.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC startup.
Good calls, good visuals. Coming up next on the timeline of things will be the fairing jettison. Fairings are jettisoned in real time.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And good onboard camera views there of those 29 Starlink V2 mini satellites. The fairing halves will be recovered a little bit further downrange from the drone ship. This is just the second time that SpaceX has opted to fly a batch of 29 of its Starlink V2 mini optimized satellites. The current stated limit, according to SpaceX, for its Falcon 9 rockets when it's flying in its reusable configuration. Just see the payload fairings as they're making their way back to
So the
Earth, as
vehicles
well
are
as
on the
the
launch
rocket's upper
trajectory.
stage. A little bit faint against the bright blue sky from Chuck's vantage point. Lots of clouds from the angle of the press site, so we certainly appreciate Chuck and Jen for having a different angle on this rocket for us today. A little more than 4 minutes into this mission. We're less than 2 now from the start of the 3-engine entry burn, where the first stage will start to slow down quite dramatically. Booster is making its descent. Now just about 113 kilometers and continuing to make its way down towards the drone ship. Just read the instructions. This is the 15th flight of this particular first stage booster, B1083. Its first mission was back on March 4th of last year when it launched the Crew 8 mission to the International Space Station on board Dragon Endeavour. Most recently, it flew on September 3rd when it launched a batch of 28 Starlink V2 mini satellites on the Starlink 10-22 flight. Little more than 5.5 minutes into the mission so far. About 30 seconds until the start of the entry burn, which will last a total of less than 30 seconds.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
With the conclusion of the entry burn, SpaceX will next turn to the start of the landing burn. That's set to begin at about T plus 7 minutes and 58 seconds, so roughly 1 minute from now.
Stage 1 transonic.
First stage booster traveling below the speed of sound. Visuals restored. Coming up to the start of that landing burn here in about 20 seconds or so.
Stage 1 landing burn startup.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
And a good touchdown for B-1083, completing its 15th trip to space and back.
MVAC shutdown.
Confirmation of MVAC shutdown. Standing by for words about a nominal parking orbit, which don't always get included in the broadcast as we just saw, but assuming that nominal parking orbit was achieved, the upper stage will coast now until about T plus 54 minutes and 31 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second burn of the upper stage engine to circularize its orbit, and then the Starlink satellites are set to be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes, 53 seconds post liftoff. As a reminder, we're getting our launch replays ready for you, so don't go anywhere. In the meantime, we'll go over the mission stats that currently stand to give you some context on where we are with SpaceX's launches so far this year. Context for the company within its own parameters, as well as the greater space landscape. As we get those stats ready for you here in just a moment. First off, want to thank channel member Deb for a $5 super chat saying, "Thank you, Spaceflight Now. Love your coverage of these launches." Also, thanks to channel member Chuck Close for a very generous $25 super chat. Thank you, Chuck. Really appreciate your support today. And thanks to another channel member, Well Reasoned Superhawk. Says, per usual, best coverage of launches anywhere. Thank you, Spaceflight Now team and mods. Thank you for the kind words, Superhawk. Speaking of spaceflight history, today is also the 16th anniversary of the launch, the one and only launch of the Ares 1X vehicle that lifted off from Launch Complex 39B. With some other context for you on this mission, as we mentioned previously, this was the 15th flight of the Falcon 9 booster B-1083 in the SpaceX fleet. This was the company's 555th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 138th of the year so far. This was SpaceX's 490th Falcon booster reflight, with a launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was the team's 169th orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 288th orbital launch for SpaceX from Pad 40, and the 343rd overall orbital launch from this site as well. Here's a look at the bar chart of things as they currently stand. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 139th good landing on the drone ship Just Read the Instructions, the 430th SpaceX drone ship landing, and the 526th overall booster landing for SpaceX to date. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 90th orbital launch from Florida. And just as a point of reference, in 2024, there were a total of 93 launches from the combination of the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This was the 145th orbital launch from U.S. soil and the 158th orbital launch from a U.S. rocket company. This was the 247th orbital launch around the world. 5 orbital mishaps so far this year. Here's where the pie chart now currently stands. We're just about ready with those launch replays for you, but before we go ahead and get to that point, want to share a photo with you as captured by photographer John Pisani. Standing by just one moment as we get that ready. Really nice photo of liftoff here now about 15 minutes ago. With some wonderfully still waters there to capture that very nice reflection. We'll flash up the handles of our photographers at the end of the broadcast so you can see this and many other launch photos from them. For now, though, let's go ahead and turn to the launch replays, starting with Adam Bernstein's wide view from here at the press site. And that will go ahead and do it for our launch replays. Just a quick thank you to Okta for a super chat there. Going to go ahead and close things out with our broadcast today. I want to thank our moderators who've been helping out in the live chat, to Jeff Hansen, Rick Donner, and I believe we saw Mark Otto pop in here earlier in the broadcast. Thanks as well to Cumulus Granatus for helping to answer folks' questions. Big thanks, as always, to our photographer team. You can be sure to follow them at their handles here on X, John Pisani at John Pisani Photo, Adam Bernstein at ABurn NYC, and Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. Also be sure to follow Spaceflight Now. You can find us on most of the socials by just looking up Spaceflight Now. Want to thank our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, as well as Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions for aiding in tracking of this Falcon 9 rocket. Also, a big thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast today. Most importantly, though, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. We certainly appreciate your time and attention, and we look forward to welcoming you back in when next we have a launch to cover. As a reminder, there are a number of orbital flights coming up on the horizon, and some big ones too. So head over to our website, spaceflightnow.com, anytime at your convenience, to get an overview of what's on the launch horizon. And that way you'll be kept in the loop when we've got a mission coming up. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.